I want to say hi and welcome to everyone, especially our friends out there in Southeast Asia. I hope you enjoyed the break that you had the last 2.5 weeks and that it was pleasant for you. And I just want to say, welcome to Sutta and the City, coming to you live from Houston, Texas. That's right, everyone. Despite the pandemic, Sutta and the City likes to shake things up and keep it real, and that's what we're doing right here. We have our wonderful and esteemed Venerable Ayavimala, also, I believe, a fellow Houstonian, and I want to say to Ayavimala, hello. Hello from Houston. We like to go from city to city, because the Dharma is in every city. Hello to our friends in Kuala Lumpur. And I know there's so many other cities that I've left out. And I want to say hello to Stephen Sass, who's joining us, I believe, somewhere near to Yonkers.
The same room.
Not
same your room. My same room.
That's right.
Different time zone. Now we're in multi-time zoning sutta.
Hey, that's how we do it. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're very happy to be starting this new session with you all. So for those of you who filled out the surveys, I want to thank you very much. We really took what you had to share to heart. If you have not received a survey, please let us know. We will resend you one. You might want to check in your spam filters as well. Your voice is important, and we want to be able to make sure that we make programming that aligns with your interests. So as such, we have created this, this little mini syllabus for the fall. We got some requests for more reading from the female monastics, that is the Theris. And so Stephen and I got together and we created this little curriculum, and we hope that you enjoy it. We had a good time putting it together. We got the Bhikkhuni-Samyutta, I believe, from the Samyutta Nikaya. And Stephen, why don't you tell us a bit about this chapter?
Okay. First, I have a joke riddle question for you. Are you ready?
Go for
it. What do you call the type of cloth that bhikkhunis wear?
I was going to say, I don't know, actually.
Terry cloth. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that wasn't the...
Oh, come on. I just came up with it.
It's okay. It's brilliant.
Terry cloth. Never mind. Okay, moving on. Okay, so we, Regina and I, came up with this idea to sort of investigate the bhikkhunis as represented in the Pali Canon. And the two big places to look, maybe the most famous place, is the actual standalone book or collection of verses called the Therigatha, which means the verses of the female elders. And the other place to look is in the Samyutta Nikaya, which sometimes is translated as the Connected Discourses. And it's a giant book, and the first giant section of that book is all about verses. So text with verses. Therigatha means with verse. Notoriously difficult to translate. Fortunately, we were able to use Venerable Bodhi's translation. And there's a whole Samyutta, which would mean sort of like a section of this, called the Bhikkhuni-Samyutta. So connected discourses with the bhikkhunis. And so we have the idea to sort of intersperse the Samyutta presentation of these bhikkhunis with the Therigatha verses in one document that we have created for this very group. So we're excited to start with that. And so maybe we can start talking about Alavika.
Let me go ahead and share the screen, Stephen. All right. Alavika.
And so this, just the way we've done it in our text, the regular black text is the Samyutta Nikaya, and the red colored text would be the Therigatha. And so it seems as if Alavika doesn't have a set of poems in the Therigatha, It's a little confusing because it seems like she is in fact the very same person as Sela. So we'll come to her poems later, but we can maybe read the Therigatha Sela verses today just for sort of completion, because we're told that they are one and the same. Alavi is actually a place in northern India, or at least it was, near Savatthi. There was actually a famous Yakka, which is sort of like a demon, who lived there in a cave. And there's a rather interesting and somewhat amusing sutta that is found in a couple places in the canon of a sort of a question and answer, or a riddle and answer question between the Buddha and this Yakka in Alavi. So Alavika would be a woman from Alavi. So maybe without any further ado, we can jump right in and start reading.
I think that's a great idea. So what we're going to do, we're going to continue as we did previously in the summer, which is for those of you who would like to read, click on the participants button, hover over your name, and then there'll be an option to raise hand. So if you'd like to read, go ahead and raise your hand. And this time we'll try something different. Sue-Ann has always been at the vanguard, but we're gonna shake it up because that's what we're doing this fall. And we'll go by the hand order, even though you know, Sue-Ann is always in our heart. So please raise your hands for those of you who would like to read, because we would love to hear you read. And if you haven't read, step up, because we would love to hear you. So we see a hand raised from Jane Marie, which is great. Jane Marie, it's great to see you back. It's always wonderful to see you. So yes, if you can start us off, that would be wonderful. And Young Kuei after Jane Marie.
Thank you, Gina.
Absolutely. So if you can read this prose part here, that would be wonderful, Jane Marie.
Okay. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jada's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Then, in the morning, the Bhikkhuni Alavika, dressed and taking bowl and robe, entered Savatthi for alms. When she had walked for alms in Savatthi and had returned from her alms round, after her meal, she went to the blind men's grove seeking seclusion. Then Mara, the evil one, desiring to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror in the Bhikkhuni Alavika, desiring to make her fall away from seclusion, approached her and addressed her in verse.
Thank you so much, Jane Marie. Young Kuei, if you can read up to the stanza that says 520.
There is no escape in the world. So what will you do with seclusion? Enjoy the delights of sensual pleasure. Don't be remorseful later. Then it occurred to Bhikkhuni Alavika, now who is it that recited the verse? A human being or non-human being? Then it occurred to her, this is Mara, the evil one, who has recited the verse, desiring to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror in me, desiring to make me fall away from seclusion. Then the Bhikkhuni Alavika, having understood, this is Mara, the evil one, replied to him in verses.
Wonderful. And who would like to finish off? Since we don't have a volunteer, why don't we?
I would.
Yes, that's who I was going to call on. Go for it, Sue-Ann.
Okay. There is an escape in the world, which I have closely touched with wisdom. O evil one, kinsman of the negligent, you do not know that state. Sensual pleasures are like swords and stakes, the aggregates like their chopping block. What you call sensual delight has become for me non-delight. Then Mara, the evil one, realizing the Bhikkhuni Alavika knows me, sad and disappointed, disappeared right there.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. Stephen, was there something you wanted to go over? Do you want to go through it and then discuss?
Maybe what I'd like to do first is just read the Halasi translation of Sela's verses, which are almost the same. So if you would go back to the first of the three,
Sure.
I'll read off. They're almost exactly the same, but we're hearing a different translator. So it might be interesting to hear what that sounds like. So this is spoken by Mara to her.
And
There is no freedom in the world. What will you accomplish by being all alone? Enjoy the pleasures of sex now. You won't regret it later. Sela replied, the pleasures of swords and stakes, like the chopping block on which they cut. What you call the delights of sensual pleasure are no delights for me now. What you take as pleasures are not for me. The mass of mental darkness is split open. Know this, evil one. You are defeated. You are finished. So she definitely sounds like a rather strong person.
very strong, absolutely.
And so I guess the first question that always pops into my mind when I read this, and I don't think there's really an answer, unfortunately, but maybe it should be addressed, is who is Mara, or what is Mara? Because he kind of becomes I say he, maybe I should say it or she. This being appears in the canon a fair amount, and it doesn't seem to be ascribed to a specific sort of realm. Like, is this Mara a deva, a demon, a human, a yucca? I don't know. It doesn't seem to say. It doesn't seem to be, associated clearly with one sort of group of beings. And I guess another question is, how literally do we even take this? Is this sort of like, maybe this should be read as like the subconscious, like the dark urges of the mind. When we're sitting there alone, this pops up. Or maybe this is supposed to be like a real being. I don't know the answer to that, but it's definitely puzzling for me.
One thing that I understand where you're coming from in terms of Mara, but being, non-being, Deva, what strikes me and what is hopeful for me is that once Mara, whatever Mara is, once Mara is seen, Mara loses his power. And the person who sees Mara is empowered and transcends the grip of Mara. And to me, that's so important. So often we go about life believing what people say about us, believing what we think about ourselves, believing what we've been told about ourselves. But it's that moment when we realize this isn't true. This isn't me. This is something else. This whatever it is, some entity, some outward force wishing harm upon me. And once that's seen, it can't be unseen. And that person is then empowered, as it were.
It almost seems sometimes that Mara is a little bit like comic relief, because Mara is constantly being foiled and busted again, and he just kind of gives up. He just disappears. So in a way, I guess he would be I think if I was sitting in some sort of secluded place in the forest and I started hearing voices, I would be pretty scared. But he doesn't seem that scary to these bhikkhunis, which I think is also another sort of maybe interesting observation, that there's very little that we hear about these women being freaked out. They're like, oh, again with the Mara, kind of, that seems more their attitude than like frozen in fear and immobilized. So I think that's interesting too, that these women were no joke. They were in the forest alone and, extremely powerful.
Yeah, I just want to add that I've stayed at some monasteries in the woods in the Thai forest tradition, and walking from the meditation hall to my room has scared the daylights out of me so many times, like really, really scared me. And it's so easy to believe in these supernatural forces, even though it's like we know that this seems outrageous or whatever. So for them not to be afraid is amazing to me.
Maybe I'll ask Bhante Mangala, knowing that he has lived for a good amount of time in the forest, that have you had any kind of terrifying voice experiences that you would be willing to tell us about, or not at all?
Yeah, of course. In my I had about a 5-minute walk from the main building to my kuti in the woods. So I had to go uphill in the dark to my kuti in rural West Virginia, with who knows what was on the other side of the property, you know, our neighbors. So, and in my kuti, for many years, I had no lock or anything. So of course, all those little maras in the head, you know, would always pop in. Like when I was walking through the woods at night, I'll be like, oh, there's a serial killer behind that tree or that bush. It's gonna come jumping out. He's gonna get me. Or, you know, Freddy Krueger or something's gonna come popping out and slash me. So like when we're reading these verses, it just really reminds me of that kind of that survival instinct of be afraid because you don't know what's gonna happen, you know? So, but like what would happen when this would pop up when I was walking, I'll just remind myself, that's nonsense. These are just voices in the mind. You know, there's just Mara trying to instill fear in us. So, but like, and when you stop and reflect and remind yourself of, this is just fear, these are just voices in the mind, or despite what somebody says, what is good for us, that sensual pleasures are good for us, we know the truth. We have wisdom. It's just bringing up that wisdom and making that wisdom the forefront of our guidance instead of what we're told is good for us or what to be afraid of. So it's yeah, so.
Right. Thank you very much.
That's what I've gotten from the verses and the discussion.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bhante. I mean, one thing I will say, what can be scarier sometimes than those voices in the mind?
Mm-hmm.
And being lost in the dark in the woods. I know Bhante told me a story once about his flashlight conking out in the middle of the night and being literally lost in the dark. And I know how dark it can get. I mean, really dark. Mm-hmm. I think I would probably completely freak out. I think the kinsman of the negligent would definitely appear on my doorstep at that moment. I just want to go home and that's it. I'm done with this, right? So I think this is sort of a very visceral kind of sutta.
Right. It's a visceral experience, and it's one that so few people have nowadays because we so often live in cities where there's constant lights, constant people, there's cars, and you have to have had this experience to get it. And unfortunately, we don't often have that opportunity. I think it would be great to move on to the next one. I just wanted to point out on 521, you know, we've so often talked about renunciation and how so many people don't really like this idea of renunciation. But what I love about this is she says, sensual pleasures are like swords and stakes, the aggregates like their chopping block. And what I love is says here is that what you call sensual delight has become for me non-delight. She's completely free from all of these worldly pleasures that were really an entrapment.
Exactly. So she has definitely seen through this, and she's just not even remotely tempted. She's done with it. She's moved on.
Right, right. And speaking of moving on, we get to hear from the next enlightened one. This is Venerable Soma. You know, we're going to take volunteers, but I'm wondering if it would be so nice to hear Ayavimala read. Would you like to read this prose section, Ayavimala, of Soma? Great.
Unmute. At Sawati, then in the morning, the Bhikkhuni Soma, dressed and, taking bowl and robe, entered Sawati for alms. When she had walked for alms in Sawati and had returned from her alms round, after her meal she went to the blind men's grove for the day's abiding. Having plunged into the blind men's grove, she sat down at the foot of a tree for the day's abiding. Then Mara, the evil one, desiring to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror in the Bhikkhuni Soma, desiring to make her fall away from concentration, approached her and addressed her in verse.
How about you be Mara, and then we'll go on to Diane.
Okay. That state so hard to achieve, which is to be attained by the seers, can't be attained by a woman with her two-fingered wisdom.
Mara. Okay, Diane.
Then it occurred to the Bhikkhuni Soma, now who is this that recited the verse, a human being or a non-human being? Then it occurred to her, this is Mara, the evil one, who has recited the verse, desiring to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror in me, desiring to make me fall away from concentration. Then the Bhikkhuni Soma, having understood, this is Mara, the evil one, replied to him in verses. Do you want me to?
How about, well, do we have any? Okay, Todd raised his hand. So Todd, if you can finish the sutta for us, please. Thank you, Diane. That was beautiful.
Todd, you're mute. Okay, now you're unmuted.
What does womanhood matter at all when the mind is concentrated well, when knowledge flows on steadily, as one sees correctly into Dhamma? One to whom it might occur, I'm a woman, or I'm a man, or I'm anything at all, is fit for Maras to address. Then Mara, the evil one, realizing the Bhikkhuni Soma knows me, sad and disappointed, disappeared right there.
Just like that.
Wow. Well, this certainly seems like gender politics to me.
Yeah, I'm not so down with that. You know, I have to say, since you brought up gender politics, I love these different groves, you know, the squirrel grove and the deer grove. But I was sitting here when I was first reading this, where is it? What perfect place for a bhikkhuni, or any woman for that matter, to go to find peace, but a blind man's grove. I mean, you got to think about it, right? It's perfect.
Yeah. I also find it interesting that it's been rendered plunged into. It's a very unusual choice of words.
Yeah, that is.
Plunged into. It seems like it would be a very sort of densely secluded place where you couldn't see very far in the jungle, almost like being immersed in the jungle. So I think it's just really fascinating that, you know, Mara attacks her gender, and her response is to not really come back and say, well, women are actually awesome, but by dismissing the gender discussion entirely. What does womanhood matter at all? One to whom it might occur, I'm a woman, or I'm a man, or I'm anything at all, is fit for Mara to address. And so rather progressive, I don't know if even that's the right word, certainly thinking outside the box. What do you think?
I mean, I'm looking forward to like reading the poem so that we can hear others' thoughts. But just to inject, I know I've said this before, but this is a time when women, I mean, I don't know, perhaps goats might have been worth more than many women. Women were chattel, women were slaves, women were property. So for her to, you know, it's just so easy to bow down to like other people's thoughts of ourselves, especially if they come from on high and they pick something that can really make us feel badly about ourselves, whether it's our gender, which, as we know, it's very easy to do that with women, Or, for example, if we're self-conscious that we don't have enough wealth, and someone would be, say something like, "You're a poor man, what are you doing here?" And these are things that when people find that spot of vulnerability, it's so easy, I think, for us to be like, "Oh my goodness, I am. How dare I grace these doors?" But to not even entertain that is where the power is. To know your worth.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
important, and I think it's very important in life, but in the spiritual path, because this is not an easy path. We have said over and over again, this practice requires a great deal from us, and in order to maintain our faith on this path, we do have to have some type of confidence, both in the Dhamma and in our ability to be worthy of it. And I see that in these women, and it's very inspiring to me.
Well, Venerable Soma certainly seems confident, but I think it's amazing that she says, in a sense, I'm not anything at all. So it's kind of a very powerful and provocative statement. Maybe we should read the Therigatha companion
Let's
piece.
do it.
Do we have some people who would like to read Soma's verses from Therigatha?
Surely we would. It's just these three. And we have Ulysses. Fabulous. Okay, Ulysses. It looks like we have, if Ulysses, if you could do the first two. Okay. Was there someone else who? Okay.
We had a hand, but it seems to have gone away.
Okay. Okay, so Ulysses, you could read all three stanzas for us, please.
Spoken by Mara to her. It is hard to get to the place that sages want to reach. It is not possible for a woman, especially not with only 2 fingers worth of wisdom. Sama replied, "What does being a woman have to do with it? What counts is that the heart is settled and that one sees what really is. What you take as pleasures are not for me. The mass of mental darkness has split open. Know this, evil one. You are defeated. You have finished."
Beautiful. Oh, you guys are
Nice.
such great readers. I love it. Woo! You really put, the spirit into it. That's really powerful. You're defeated. Don't you wish that we could just say that to our doubts that keep hounding us? You're defeated. On with you.
I'm done. Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah.
Well, should we take some comments and questions about Soma and Alavika?
Yes. Ulysses, you had a...
Yes.
Go
Yes.
ahead.
I was just thinking when I was reading this about the experience I had in Myanmar, because I've been there 2 times already, and one of the things that struck me as very difficult to accept and was the fact that women are not allowed to get close to the Buddha in altars. They have an issue with ordaining bhikkhunis, and I don't know the legalities behind, why this happens over there, but it seems to me like they forgot the sutta. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Ulysses. It's heartbreaking for me, the situation with those who want to attain higher ordination in Burma / Myanmar. It's a very difficult situation. There's the fourfold Sangha that the Buddha founded, and to me that's quite clear. And if you follow the Buddha's teachings, then you would. This is a very controversial topic.
The same thing happened with Venerable Ajahn Brahm when he started ordaining women out there in Australia, and he himself was like sort of kicked out of his own sangha, and it's just one of those things where I am glad that now there seem to be, the translations that Bhikkhu Bodhi has made and some others are bringing more clarity and more bringing some of the suttas out of obscurity. And hopefully, I don't know, I just hope that someday there will be some kind of change. Everything changes.
Well, I think the good news is that there are increasingly more and more places where women can go and practice well. Maybe I'll say that. Mm-hmm. That there are more and more opportunities for women to ordain in some sense and practice in a very supportive atmosphere.
Diane?
A question about the 2 fingers worth of wisdom. I'm not familiar with that expression. It just sounds very insulting. Does it just mean they're not worth it? Women are not worth the bother?
Yes.
Well, I mean, there is a whole sort of commentarial explanation, which I'm not sure we need to go into. But I think the general sense of it is that 2 is a small part of 10 or 5. They're like not even worth half.
So yeah, if you have 5 fingers on a hand, 2 is out of 5, or right, exactly. So yeah, there's many people who still do think this way today. It's not just Mara, but these women are not letting that stop them. Susan has her hand up.
Sorry, I was going to try to read. So I
okay. We're so sorry we weren't able to have you read, Susan. Thank you for volunteering.
Nada.
Okay. Ron?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, the concept when Mara goes to her and says, what do you know? It's only 2 fingers. They used to count rice just using 2 fingers. So the analogy would be that is how minute her knowledge is.
Wow, it keeps getting worse and worse.
Yeah, that's where that comes from, because the 2 fingers were used to count rice.
Thank you for that. That's very, very metaphorical. Appreciate that, Ron.
Yes.
Ron, were you wanting to add something else? Okay.
No, I'm just trying to figure out how to lower my hand, that's all.
Okay, no worries. I'll get that. Okay, you got it. Awesome. Catherine.
Yes, Regina.
Yes.
My question is, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is regarding Mara. Does Mara includes all sensuality, which is all mind-made for these cases?
So
I'm not sure if I understood the question fully.
So I believe, Catherine, you're asking if Mara is inclusive of all sensuality.
Yes, yes. That's it.
I think that Mara is definitely embodies that sensuality, and especially our desire to be pulled into that sensuality, to lose ourselves into that sensuality, to give up what matters more to us, like our practice, in order to, have something sweet to eat, or, maybe drink some liquor, drawing us in to what is not good for us and away from the practice.
Yeah, I would also say that Mara seems extremely skilled at picking the thing that the person is sort of weakest about. And so suppose there's a woman who has been told her whole life that she's inferior, not good enough, lesser. Well, then it kind of makes sense that this woman would start, entertaining that thought. Maybe I'm not really worthy of this practice. Maybe I'm not good enough. And so this kind of voice of Mara, or for a male monastic, it could be sensual desire, something that's very hard to deal with when you're living in the middle of a forest. And Mara is talking about that. So Mara seems very good at figuring out the weak link or the weak point in a person's armor and going right for that. But of course, we see at least in these suttas, that these bhikkhunis are really probably arahants. And so they are completely impervious. There's no chance for Mara. It's not a
Yeah,
fair
because
fight.
they are all arahants.
Can I make a comment?
Just hold on. Let's just, Catherine, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Your question, Sue-Ann?
I was just going to comment that, in the beginning, of course, Mara tempted the Buddha, and the Buddha's response was, "I see you, Mara." And he tempted him with everything, with armies and with sensuality and with all kinds of things. And it seems to me that maybe, I don't know, like we were saying before, is this a person? Is this our fears? I think it's our fears, and it looks like Mara is picking on these women to whatever they have gone through in their life, what they may be most afraid of or most intimidated by, and thinks he's going to get to them that way. And I think I think Mara is like our own fears, and it's said through Buddhism, or in other things as well. If you face your fears, that's the way to get through them. And I don't know, it could manifest as a spirit, or it could manifest as, I don't know, a person or a voice or whatever, or maybe just scare us in our heads. But I just think that he seems to want to pick on, because he says kind of slightly different things to all the bikinis. And maybe it's, the one who lost her sons. I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. But you understand what I mean. And in the Buddha's case, he picked on everything. And the idea of getting through and overcoming Mara seems to be, as these women did, stand up to him and say, "I see you, Mara," and therefore standing up to their fears. Does that make sense to anyone?
Right, it makes sense. It's sort of like what Stephen said. He's very skilled at picking out the weakest link in each individual. And I also, thank you for that, Sue-Ann. And I also want to point out that he's wanting to instill doubt, and, doubt being one of the hindrances. We definitely want to avoid. So thank you, Sue-Ann. And we have a limited amount of time, and we have quite a few hands raised. So Jerry?
Okay, thank you. And hello to everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I don't know, actually, this is not really my question, but you could comment on it when I'm done. I have always heard, but I don't know where it was said, that the Buddha was asked to summarize his position on suffering or to eliminate suffering. And he was like, no me, mine, or I in our life, right? So that actually has always made some sense to me. And I must admit that I barely came here today. I forced myself because I'm in a rotten mood for quite a few. And I guess maybe I don't want to be touched, or I don't know what it is. But at any rate, that Stephen already mentioned it, the verse 524, where it says, "One to whom it might occur, if I'm a man, I'm a woman, or any I," because in the version here, the I is in quotations. It's another way of saying the same thing. And damn if that verse didn't get into my heart and soften it a bit. To go back and look at what I've been suffering, how much of it is based on this I that I've created? Does that make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Some of the most difficult times in my life, I've noticed that my ruminations have been about the self. And so, yes, it does make a lot of sense, Jerry. And I really appreciate your sharing. It really touched me, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and I won't say what the line is because it's too personal and it seems too ridiculous at my age. But the line that runs through my head when I start to sort of go down into a bad mood is definitely been saying it for at least that I'm, 55 or 60 or 65 years. There's an I attached to that. And could I say to that line, I don't really care that you're that miserable because of blank, blank, blank. You know, just not that I don't care, but not today. I wonder, I'm going to see how that goes actually. But it is an I, right? We identify with our own negativity as it's ours.
Right.
Yes, there's definitely the I making and mind making for sure.
And suffering making, yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Young Hui.
So I'm sitting with some discomfort in hearing the discussion and making these somewhat sounds like conclusions about the gender, because I don't really have, because I'm too not too much a novice. I don't really have the male counterpart to these. So for example, I'm curious about the arousing fear, the Mara's role in arousing fear. Is that fairly typical of Mara? If when someone goes in, seclusion, is that what Mara does anyway to anybody, regardless of gender? So I don't know. I'd like to know about that. And then the other one is, I'm curious about Blind Man's Grove. Is that particular to these women, bhikkhunis, or is that to also other bhikkhus have gone to Blind Man's Grove? I love that Blind Man's Grove because oftentimes women are seen as objects, so to be blind man, there's a certain safety involved in that, but I'm curious about that. And then number 3 is, I'm curious also about disappointed and sad. Mara at the end, when Mara doesn't get what Mara wants, is disappointed and sad. There's a very sweet relational aspect to that. I don't know if that's a typical thing. And then, so, I mean, that's the main thing. I'm just curious about what's the male counterpart to this? And we're making these views about, women, but is that, does that come up with the bhikkhus? Yeah. So,
Yes, I think it's a good question. And I think that's partially why I try to include Bhante Mangala, who's with us this evening, because he's a real life bhikkhu that really lived in the forest and really told us that he had a lot of fear in the forest. So I think being scared in the forest is not a gendered opinion or emotion. I think I spoke about myself being scared in the forest. And it seems to me that pretty much anyone who, especially if not used to it, become very scared being alone in the forest. So I don't think this is a gendered kind of attack. I think some of the attacks Mara lodges are gendered when he talks about a woman being two-fingered. So I think Mara is sort of a no-holds-barred assailant in that sense. In terms of Blind Man's Grove, just looking quickly at the gloss here, we were told that both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis both went there for seclusion. So it doesn't seem to have a connotation of a women-only zone. So I think that it's kind of charming, Regina's idea that it would be Blind's Man because men couldn't see the bhikkhunis, but I don't really think that is sort of the truth of it. But maybe it doesn't really matter the sort of factual details of the story, but rather sort of how they managed to deal with these fears and these doubts and how they managed to overcome them.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I kind of was meaning that I would like to be in the Blind Man's Grove. But with that was my own personal experience. Ron has his hand up. We'd love to hear from Ron.
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Hi, very good, Ron.
Good. I wanted to answer a question. I belong to another sutta group also from Buddhist Insights in West Orange, Empty Cloud Monastery. So they were going over the Soma Sutra, and a question was asked, is Mara a real being, or is he a metaphorical representation of our own subconscious? And the answer is both, because you have insight and you have these fears or these doubts and you come to a realization. But he's also real because Mara, when he attacked the Buddha, when the Buddha is trying to attain enlightenment, right? He tempted him with his daughters. So Mara reproduced and had daughters. So Mara, in fact, is a being with the ability to reproduce. So Mara is both a being and he's both a metaphorical reference point.
Thank you, Ron. And it is true that last night of the Buddha's awakening, Mara tempted the Buddha with everything, dancing girls, all kind. He, as Stephen would say, he pulled out all the stops. So yes, this is true. And he also did use his daughters to tempt the Buddha as well.
And he also pretty much fails every time. So that's why I said he's a little bit like comic relief, because he never seems to quite pull it off. Yeah, I think we have one more question, if we could take it from Susan.
Yes, so after the Abhidhamma talk, and because of the fire in Oregon, the idea of death is really nearby. So during the Abhidhamma talk itself, I was already beginning to pack up all my clothes to give away, to start this idea of no self, all my lovely clothes, and that means my ego. So my question here to Diana, if Vimala, Bhikkhuni Vimala, how am I going to be strong in this conviction when I give away all the clothes that I've acquired? Mara is around me all the time now, laughing and say, "You're going to regret this. You're giving away all this. In 2 months' time, you forget about your Buddhism and you need to have your clothes. You're going to regret this." So I'm hearing this, and I'm crying as I'm packing away and giving away my clothes. Please, Bhikkhuni Vimala, how does one give away stuff and still be strong?
Vimala?
I don't think it really matters if we give our stuff away or if we still have some stuff. I don't think that's where our strength comes from. But it's it's not being attached to it, to whatever we have.
Thank you, Aya.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good place to leave it.
It is. That's beautiful. Non-attachment. Thank you for that. And yes, Susan, our hearts are with you. And the wildfires in the West are really something that's frightening. We have just a few seconds left, and perhaps we can do a little bit of metta for the wildfires and for the people suffering. So we wish
for the animals suffering.
The animals, it breaks my heart. So may all beings be free from suffering, even as they are suffering. All the trees that are burning in the West, and all the poor animals who are helpless to save themselves from the terrible, terrible suffering that they're experiencing. We wish that their suffering may be swift, brief, and that they may be brought to a better place and come back to a more peaceful world. We wish that this is so very, very much, very fervently in our hearts, and we will dedicate our practice to making the world a better place for all living beings. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining me with that. It's been something that's been very painful for me to witness, almost unbearable. So thank you for sharing that moment of metta with me. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we hope to see you again. We hope that you enjoy this little, like I said, this little program that we put together on the Bhikkhunis. And we'll be discussing more. And we will see you this coming Sunday. And thank you, one and all, for being with us tonight. It's really special for us to see you again. And yeah, Stephen, any announcements, any thoughts?
No, I'm just looking forward to learning more about the Bhikkhunis. Come back on Sunday.
Fabulous. Thank you, one and all. Stay safe, and we'll see you again Sunday. Have a wonderful evening or morning.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Bye, everybody. Blessings.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
One, be
Bye,
safe.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Kuala Lumpur,
Bye.
Singapore, Kuala Lumpur. Who else am I leaving out? Any other countries?
Uruguay.
Uruguay! Viva Uruguay! Fabulous. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
You too. Thanks, Regina and Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the loving work and effort that you put into this every week.
Oh, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you.
Welcome. I'm sorry you can't see me. There's no me to see.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's perfect.